For episode 6 of Pixelated Audio, we're headed back to the Sega Genesis to revisit a game we both spent a lot of time playing in the 90s called Vectorman.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Pixelated Audio. As always, I'm James, and this is Brian.
What's up?
And like he said, we're talking about a game that we both loved as kids.
Yeah, the first track that we heard was Day 7, Rock and Roller, and Day 14, Underground Vault. And they're both the same track, but different levels they play over. And
we'll see that a few other times throughout this episode. But
right.
I mean, what an awesome track. This definitely has a different sound than what we've heard on the Sega Genesis.
It's another one of those tracks that you really have to hear. I mean, this whole album is one of those things that you got to hear with headphones on because there's so much stereo, sounds going on. It's very like the syncopated rhythm. It's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. And I really like the that kind of like muted xylophone sound that kind of comes in and it's
it's rad. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it has like a really cool range of sound. Like this composer really gets a good range of notes going. So it's not like very kind of boring. Like you get bored of the track very quickly. It's really energetic, and I remember when playing this game, like I was really excited about the music. Even as a kid, I was like, I felt kind of cool playing this game.
Right, yeah. So today we're going to cover both Vectorman 1 and 2, talk about the composer a little bit, and that's Jon Holland, and also play some tracks for you.
Yeah, and this is one of those franchises that got bundled into a lot of those greatest hits compilations, but we never really got to see any new versions of the game after Vectorman 2.
Yeah, it's too bad. But yeah, we'll get into that shortly.
The first game, Vectorman, was published by Sega in 1995.
And this is 6 years into the roughly 10-year lifespan of the Sega Genesis?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Anyways, it was published by Sega, but developed by a California-based company called BlueSky Software. And BlueSky Software has done a lot of games for other systems like the Atari 7800, the Lynx, Amiga, Commodore 64.
Yeah, all the Sega hardware, Master System, Game Gear, Genesis 32X.
Yeah, and when I was a kid, I actually had Joe Montana Football for the Game Gear that was made by them, and I played it a ton. I mean, I played it all the time. There's actually a pretty funny story behind getting the handheld for Christmas, but I'm going to save that for a Game Gear specific episode.
Sounds good.
But that was one of the games that my parents got me to play, and so that was my early experience with BlueSky Software, which was pretty cool.
Nice. Did you have to change the batteries between downs?
Yeah, I know, right? I was actually just thinking that, for a handheld, I actually had to be plugged into the wall a lot for that.
A lot of the time. But you guys would probably know BlueSky best from Jurassic Park or Shadowrun on the Genesis.
Yeah, and sadly, we won't be seeing any more from them. The company was founded in 1988 and lasted until about 2001 when their parent company, which was Interplay, had some financial trouble, and it really caused them to close up shop.
Yeah, it seems kind of like a common trend for, small companies.
Yeah, unfortunately. But they really left us with some great music.
For sure. So yeah, the game was composed by Jon Holland, and it has this really cool up-tempo techno or like electronic vibe.
Right.
And there's actually a really good interview. It's about 30 minutes long with him, done by Valentin Kozin in 2013, where he kind of explains the soundtrack and its release and what he did with it. I have a clip. Let me find it here.
So what I did is I'd heard a lot of Genesis music from people, and I realized that's not what I wanted to do. not because it wasn't good. I just wanted to do something different. I was involved with dance music. I was involved in the whole electronic music scene at the time, you know. I thought that the best thing for being limited to 6 notes of polyphony, meaning 6 notes at one time, I think it was 5 or 6 notes, I forgot, but maximum at one time. So anybody who plays a musical instrument knows that that's like one chord, or, you know, one guitar strum or whatever. I didn't want to do wow. To me, I would fall asleep listening to that. So I thought, wow, okay, you have 5 or 6 notes. Dance music is about syncopation. Kick drum, bass line, kick drum, bass line, hi-hat, kick drum, bass. Nothing really seems to happen on the same beat. Very rare, you know, and again, depends what you're talking about. But in the case of the Genesis, we could make Kraftwerk, Depeche Mode kind of soundtracks with using some clever syncopation, delaying the MIDI channel by a fraction so that they don't hit at the same time. So now you have 8th note delays, 16th note delays, you know what I'm saying? Meaning that you get like an echo. And there's no echo, but you're hearing 2 notes, just the second note is softer than the first. So if you end up with, so it's none of the notes are hitting at the same time, you know?
Yes.
That is the concept of the entire Vectorman soundtrack. It's about syncopation.
It's cool when we get to hear from the composer about, you know, how things got done and stuff like that. It's pretty rad.
Yeah, totally. I spoke with him a bit last week, and he's just a super nice guy. We'll make sure we put the link for that interview in the show notes as well, so you can check that out.
Yeah, and the music was so well received, and not only by fans, but by Sega, that it was actually one of the few American games to get released by itself on CD, which was really rare in the 90s.
Yeah, up until recently, you didn't see that happen much here, let alone, you know, a game soundtrack release in general.
Right.
But on that note, I think we should play some more tracks. What do you think?
Sounds good to me.
First up, we have Introduction. Following that, we have Day 1, which is also Day 6. And then after that, we have Day 3, which is also Day 12. So let's get those started, and we'll be right back.
The tracks you just heard were Introduction, Day 1 Terraport / Day 6 Bamboo Mill, and Day 3 Tidal Surge / Day 12 Nightscape, composed by Jon Holland for Vectorman on the Sega Genesis.
Yeah, those are awesome tracks. The intro, the introduction track, that first one, and they're all very short.
Right.
It's really cool. I love how, like he was saying when we heard that interview, he's like talking about the syncopation. I really like that. And I'd love, like, halfway in, the drums or the beat drops, or the drums just, are gone, and it's silent, and you hear that melody, and then it kicks back on, and I really like that. I think it's awesome.
Right, and all these tracks really they really remind me of when I was a kid playing them. Like, as soon as I heard these, it instantly, like, every track that we played instantly reminds me of this game. And
that nostalgia.
And that's really, really awesome to see, because sometimes you get a game that has one or two tracks that do that, but this one, it's like every one we play, I just remember sitting there playing it and just how cool this music sounded and how different it was.
Yeah, and Day 1 Terraport, like, that's a very kind of iconic, because it's the first level, and that's what you start with. So you hear that a lot of every time you pop in the game, you're going to hear that track, unless you skip ahead or something like that. But that song was meant to be good, because
the one you hear a lot,
because you're going to hear it right off the bat, and it's going to kind of shape the way that you see the game.
Yeah, no matter your skill level, you're gonna hear it, and then you hear it again on day 6. So.
Yeah. So Day 3, the next track we played, Tidal Surge, and it's also the same track as Day 12. I love that track, but it's kind of like a love-hate relationship with it. Right.
No, I love that track too, but like you were saying before, for Day 12, it's a very kind of frustrating level.
Yeah.
I never got that far. I love it from day 3.
I love the music. I love the music. I really do. But like that level, pisses me off so bad, because it's like flickering lights. It gets really dark, and this is towards the end of the game anyway.
Yeah.
When you get hit in the game, you take damage and you get blow like far back, and there's all these little beetles that are flying around, and you can't really see them, so you just get nailed every which way, and it was frustrating. But
yeah, and that's one thing that this game did really cool, was like that lighting, like, and they played with that, and so I could see how that level would be really frustrating, but like I said, I never got that far, so thankfully I love this track and can listen to it all day long.
But back to Vectorman, it's a pretty straightforward run and gun 2D platformer where you play as a very green and very spherical protagonist called Vectorman. The game spans across 16 levels, and the story for it's pretty simple, like a lot of other platformers, but it does the job to set up the world.
Yeah, it's the year 2049, and all humans have left Earth a wasteland. Before leaving the planet, they set up these special Orbots, or robots with bodies made of orbs.
It kind of has that Rayman feel to it, with like the floating limbs.
Yeah, so basically they're left to clean up the mess.
Maybe somebody at Pixar played a lot of Vectorman.
Oh, for Wall-E.
Yeah.
I thought that reminded me of something. So anyways, one of the high-ranking Orbots named Raster accidentally gets an active nuke strapped to him, and it kind of makes him go crazy and turn into this dictator known as Warhead. He then decides to take control of all the other Orbots and turn Earth into a death trap for any returning humans.
But yeah, Vectorman is unaffected by Warhead's control, because he's off the planet doing his job, and that job is taking a bunch of toxic waste and dumping it into the sun, basically.
I guess that's one way of cleaning up. It's kind of like when I was a kid and I would clean up my room and just kind of take everything and dump it in the closet.
How'd that work for you?
Not so good. But like we said, there's not much of a story, but it works.
Right. And for weapons, Vectorman uses an energy blast that comes out of his hands, and it can be fired really rapidly by hammering down the buttons. There's no standard full auto firing, which is fine, because throughout the game you get a couple of different upgrades.
And you can get these power-ups hidden throughout the levels that kind of let you change your weapon for a short time. You can get things like a full auto machine gun, a bolo gun, and this kind of a multiple spread shot.
Yeah, and Vectorman's body can also get temporarily upgraded as well. They'll let you get into new areas, such as blowing up walls or drilling through the floor. You can even get an underwater fish form that makes you swim fast and not take any damage.
Oh yeah, and there's even a few transformations just for boss fights. So I think we should take a break and play a couple more tracks.
Yep.
First up, we have Day 5, Arctic Ridge, / Day 9, Hydroponic Lab. And then we have Day 11, Stayin Alive. So let's give those a listen, and we'll be right back.
That was Day 5 Arctic Ridge / Day 9 Hydroponic Lab and Day 11 Stayin Alive, composed by Jon Holland for Vectorman on the Sega Genesis.
That first track, Arctic Ridge / Hydroponic Lab, those are two levels that I was able to get to. So it was kind of neat to see, for me, how the same song works well for two totally different levels. And I feel like it really works great for both levels.
Yeah, it does. Arctic Ridge is probably like my favorite level in the game. And the music just is awesome. It's just really cool. It's cool because you get to walk around this ridge or this ice level, and you kind of slide around, and I usually hate that in games.
So yeah, same here.
But like it's cool because you have a smaller space, so you really get to see everything and kind of plan out where you're going to go next. And there's a lot to it. The level's really deep. It's like catacombs.
Yeah, and it's kind of neat to, instead of scrolling to the right, like you're going up. Like you're
or to the left.
You're kind of working your way up to the top of the level, and it's, you know, you kind of got to be sensitive, and like you said, you slide around, but it kind of makes you feel like you're more precise. Like you have to be a little bit more on your game to not jump too high and jump into a boss.
They could have done like something with you hear in a lot of like ice levels and stuff like that. They try to add those like jingle bell kind of things to make it sound like a Christmassy thing, maybe.
To get that snow sound to it.
But Jon Holland doesn't do that, and I like that. He doesn't have to say, "Hey, this is an ice level." Let me make it sound like ice. You know, all he needs
cool cavern.
All he cares about is the intensity in the gameplay, and so he just delivers another awesome track. So
and that really lets that track work well for a whole nother level that's not ice-like, and it's very kind of dark, and you're in a lab, so it's kind of like a creepy little level. It's pretty neat,
right? And so Stayin Alive, the next track, Day 11, that's an awesome track too. It's I almost want to say disco, but I can't really pinpoint the genre that it fits in.
Right. The tempo is up a lot more compared to the previous track, and so that it has a little bit more of an intense feel, but it's kind of just got this nice bass line to it that really goes well.
Yeah, there's only a bass drum, like a kick drum and a hi-hat. There's no other percussion in it. So it's really obvious when like halfway through he drops those out, and you can really hear that stereo sound in both ears kind of playing with your head. It's awesome. I like it.
Yeah, and that stereo sound is just something that's just so great for this game. It's just it's kind of fun listening to it. It's it's like almost like your ears are playing a game.
Right. Both Vectorman 1 and 2 use a sound driver called Gems, which was developed by Technopop.
Which Sega actually requested them to make.
Yeah, and it's used in almost 200 games for the Sega Genesis and the 32X, like Sonic Spinball, Jurassic Park, Comic Zone, Aladdin, Earthworm Jim, and Doom, and so on.
Yeah, and we see it used a lot more in the Western Sega of America developed games, and even first party, but not as much in the Sega of Japan.
Yeah, and there's some debate over using the Gems driver over Sega's generic driver, which is the SMPS. And it seems like one of the factors might be that it was a little more user-friendly for those who didn't have much Yamaha FM synth experience.
And from what I gather, Gems actually had some MIDI support, which was a big help for composers. With the SMPS, you still had to compose the old way, so musicians basically had to be programmers as well.
Yeah, and the Gems SDK was released online if anybody wants to, poke around with it. But the graphics is an interesting area of the game too. Vectorman uses pre-rendered 3D models for both level designs and the characters, and it gives us this really fluid, almost lifelike animation.
It definitely has a unique look and was kind of considered Sega's answer to Nintendo's Donkey Kong Country.
Yeah, seems like it.
And they were both pulling the same kind of tricks with using pre-rendering to kind of push the system further than really anyone thought was possible.
Yeah, it's becoming a trend in the games that we choose. Like our Xerinx episode was another company that used these really interesting tricks to kind of push the hardware.
Yeah, and that was our episode 4. So if you haven't checked that one out, I mean, it's got some insane music.
Yeah. So anyways, we do have one more track to play before we move on to Vectorman 2, and that is the options screen. It's a short track, but it's pretty rad, so we wanted to throw it in there. So let's take a listen, and we'll be right back.
short and sweet. That was Options Menu from Vectorman 1, composed by Jon Holland.
That's a cool track. Like it's cool that we threw that in because like I was thinking like, I want to fit this into a block somewhere, but just tack it on. So
yeah, and for me, I really like that track a lot. Like it actually has become one of my more favorite tracks because it has a little bit of a different feel to the beginning, and well, it just kind of like mixed in throughout the song that I really liked. It kind of showed a little bit more of his range.
Yeah, and it's not super energetic that pumps you up, but I think this is only actually in before you start the game and you have the title screen, you have start and then you have options, and that's the only time that you hear this track. So it's nowhere else in the game. It's only in that one segment. So
yeah, it's a cool little detail that they added in, which is pretty nice. Oh, and before I forget, there was this really cool play to win contest that they did for Vectorman 1. I remember having it on the cover of the box that I had. And what they did was when you were playing the game, if you could beat the game without using any cheats or codes, certain cartridges would flash you in and would give you this phone number, and you could call in and kind of see what prize that you won. And this actual 12-year-old boy from New Mexico won the grand prize of $25,000, a VIP tour of Sega, and a role in a Sega commercial, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, I always wondered if people actually won those kind of things, but I guess it really happened. So moving on, a year later in 1996, BlueSky develops a sequel, Vectorman 2, again published by Sega.
Yeah, now we're getting into the end of the life cycle of the Sega Genesis.
Yeah, it's one of the last 20 or so odd games that was released on Sega's 16-bit hardware. And what's funny is that BlueSky developed World Series Baseball 98, which is the last game Sega Sports published for the Genesis.
Yeah, it looks like they kind of stuck around the whole way through.
Yeah. The back of the box says Vectorman is back and the robot sludge barge is more awesome than ever. New morphs, power-ups, and special weapons equip Vectorman to battle with Earth's most prolific enemy, ... mutant insects.
Yeah, and again, the story isn't all that deep, and Vectorman is doing one of his trips to the sun to dump off a bunch of crap, and he gets his ship hit by a missile. And it's pretty neat. Before his ship gets hit, you see him flip on some music and start kind of rocking out by himself, which is really kind of cool. And he manages to escape, and in the first level, you're falling back down to Earth, and you end up in an abandoned research facility.
He's now got to fight through a bunch of mutant insects and kill their leader, the Black Widow Queen. And I think they just made this story up on the spot.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter, though. The game's super fun.
Yeah, I mean, as a kid, I knew that there was a brief story, but I didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to it.
Yeah, me either. I didn't even know there was a story for either of the games. I just wanted to pop it in and start shooting.
Yeah, me too.
So let's play some music.
Yeah, we have Vectorman 1, 2, 3, and they use this several times throughout the game. And then we have Bog Jam.
was Vectorman 123 and Bog Jam from Vectorman 2 for the Sega Genesis Mega Drive, composed by Jon Holland.
Now this really has I feel a similar feel, but it feels a little bit more refined to me.
I can see that. Yeah, it's even though it's only a year later, it feels like he knew it was coming and had a lot more prep time and was able to kind of deliver a new experience. It's not just the same. And
yeah, it definitely feels like that. Like the game, the sound to the game has almost like a continuation. Like it's not just like, let me rehash what we already did. And the brief experience I have with this game, I feel like the game feels like that too. Like it's very similar, but it has just like a more refined feel to it.
See, I kind of like Vectorman 1 as far as the game better, but I agree with you. Like I like the soundtrack for Vectorman 2 much, much more. And it's crazy because these songs are now, 4 minutes and or 3 minutes plus, and the first game was only a minute each.
Yeah, so he got
maybe
a lot more
he
time.
assumed that he was going to be doing a CD and was like, I'll just make a longer track. So I don't know, but
well, that's a possibility. We heard about him talking in the interview that when they came back to him, when Sega came to him and said, let's make a CD on the Vectorman 1 music, they're like, well, the tracks are only a minute long, and they're like, well, make them 4 minutes.
Yeah.
So maybe he was like, well, if they don't use the 4 minutes, then I've got a 4-minute track in case they want to do CD.
Yeah, Vectorman 123, it's a great track. Bog Jam is so mellow, so chill.
Right.
I love that song.
Yeah, and I love that, it's kind of like a guitar riff, and then that note just kind of echoes and carries off and gets fainter.
Wah.
Yeah, it gets fainter and fainter. I was like, oh man, that's so cool. I just really like that.
Yeah. But back to the game, it's really a lot like the first title in terms of gameplay, but it's still pretty fun and hasn't really changed other than some new power-ups and new levels.
Yeah, there's a pulse beam, an energy shot, and you have a super shotgun, and you can transform into an insect as well.
Yeah, nowadays this would probably be, end up as DLC or something, since you could really just append it onto the previous game and keep going.
Yeah, and it is a lot longer than the previous one. Instead of the 16 levels, you have 22.
Yeah, and I was looking at some old magazine reviews like EGM, and they seem to like the original better, kind of like I said earlier. Yeah. Vectorman 1 got like an 8.25 out of 10, and it was Game of the Year. And Vectorman 2 was like, let me see here, I think they had like a 7.3 or something for it.
Yeah, and I can see that. I mean, the brief story between the two, I thought the first one had a lot better idea than just fighting some bugs and stuff like that. But all across the board, the reviews were solid and it had really good reception. And so now I think we should get into actually a couple more tracks.
Yeah, the first up is Intro B, which is actually my favorite track of the whole game. And following that, we have Cave. So let's check them out.
You just heard Intro B and Cave, composed by Jon Holland for Vectorman 2.
Both those tracks are slick. The Intro B is, like I said, my favorite track, and it's very mellow. It has this melody that kind of comes, drifts in, drifts out, and it changes up a little bit, but it's just a solid track, and like I totally can just close my eyes and space out to it. It's really cool.
Yeah, I can totally see why you really like this track. I mean, it's a really solid track, and I love that build up. And I mean, it's a little more detailed, and I really like it.
Yeah, and this track actually isn't even in the game. It's unused.
Right.
It was probably thought like, hey, let's, as a backup, we can have this as an intro. Mm-hmm. But they decided to go with a different track. So both the tracks are great, but I thought, this is a chance that you might not be able to hear Intro B because it's not in the game.
Right. So if you played the game and you've possibly heard Intro A, then B you never actually have. So we thought that would be really cool. So, but actually, do you want to do a comparison? Between the two?
Let me find it here. So what do you want to hear first? Intro A.
Let's go Intro A first.
Okay. So here is Intro A, Vectorman's Jam. Which is equally awesome.
Oh, yeah.
And you can see it has that kind of similarity, but it is different.
It's almost just like it's restacked. Like they kind of get into that trailing note a little faster.
Yeah. And here is Intro B. Real quick. So you can see it's that same syncopated rhythm, that same kind of thing is going on, but it's like it starts different and builds differently. So So yeah, no, it's really cool that he was able to compose a few different tracks for different options that the developers wanted to go with. So that's cool.
And like you said, he may have known that Vectorman 2 was coming and had a little bit of time to say, I kind of like it like this, but here's another version like this to see what you guys like. And I can see why they chose A, just because it kind of builds a little faster. But I mean, B, like you said, is great. I really love that track.
Yeah, and then Cave, that's another cool track. I can't tell you where this is in the game other than that it's scene 13, because I never made it that far.
Right.
But all the tracks in this album or for this game are much longer, like we were saying, and we kind of had to cut it off a little bit there, kind of fade it out. But that way, you get a good sense of it because there are loops. So we wanted to do it justice there too as well.
So before we started playing the games for the show, did you ever play Vectorman 2?
Nope.
Me either.
Yeah, no, I mean, I knew it came out, but I just kind of forgot about it. I actually first played it on the GameCube, and there was this Sonic Gems collection, and it had a bunch of other stuff on it too.
Right, and it's been re-released quite a few times. And there was a Sega Genesis collection for the PS2 and PSP, the Sonic Gems collection, which we were just talking about for the GameCube, and there was a collection for the Xbox 360 and PS3, as well as the Wii Virtual Console.
Yeah, it's also on Steam right now for like $3. So
yeah, and it's worth a purchase. That's a really good deal.
It's a great deal for sure.
I really wish it came up for the 3DS as well.
Yeah,
we have another block to play. Let's see. First up is Tornado, then Lava Falls Race. So let's get them started.
That was Tornado and Lava Falls Race for Vectorman 2 on the Genesis, composed by Jon Holland.
One of the things that I've noticed with these tracks is that the songs kind of start out and the little beat that he plays, it kind of has almost like a silly feel to it, I feel like. But then you see how it builds up pretty quickly into a song that's not silly. So I just thought it was kind of interesting that it almost has like a fun, like silly feel to it, but then it builds into this really cool song that has a lot of progression and style to it, which is pretty neat.
He plays a lot with the instruments, and I like that, like how he introduces, like, you know, maybe a kick drum, like, you know, 30 seconds in or 4, and it's not like everything is hitting you all at once. He just slowly kind of adapts and changes, and then it goes back to what you hear in the, you know, that first 30 seconds, and then he does something different, and it's really cool. He has a lot of dynamics that he's playing with, and I really respect that about him. I think it's cool.
No, yeah, and you can tell that he's playing around with it a lot more, like you said, which is really cool. And you know, maybe that extra time that he gets per track really let him kind of slow things down and kind of experiment a little bit more, which is great. I mean, and these tracks are just awesome. I mean, they're really cool.
Yeah, and we've mentioned the syncopated rhythm a few times, and he said that in the interview as well. And you know, it really creates that futuristic kind of feel that the game also has. So they complement each other very well. And the game, you know, is, you know, that run and gun platformer, and you want to have this enjoyable, this, you know, keep this pace going throughout the whole time, and the music constantly has this, you know, energetic kind of get up and go feel to it, and I like that.
Yeah, and one of the things that I liked was that it's not like so overly energetic that it's like stress inducing. It's just kind of like a mellow, kind of like how Vectorman's personality seems like. He's kind of a chill guy, it seems like, and he's out there, you know, fighting things, but so it has that fast pace, but not too fast to where you feel panicked, even though there's like a time limit and stuff like that.
And it's funny because, like, you know, it's not super fast paced, but like when you are playing, like there are times where you have to just jam on that button to fire shots, because there's no rapid fire, so it's just you're just, you know, going all out on, you know, the B or A button. I think it's both, and it really you know, you're creating your own stress there because of that. But the music is consistent and solid the whole way through in both games.
Yeah, and one of the things that I liked between Tornado and Lava Falls Race is I felt like they had a similar kind of baseline beat to them. Like these two tracks felt kind of similar, but then once they start to build, they definitely go off in different directions. And I really like that it kind of showed them start kind of in the same spot and then just kind of branch out and kind of go their own way, which was really cool. To kind of show that he has quite a range in the style of, or not really the style, but like in the progression of the songs, and they all fit together, but yet no tracks feel like a copy of each other. Yeah,
and you know, even Tornado and Lava Falls Race, those are the titles of the tracks for where they play in the game, but they could probably go anywhere. I mean, there's not a really that sense of, you know, this is a like you have to think of a lava in this area. Right. So he didn't really have that constraint, which probably made it easier for him to be more creative with just sounds, like doing whatever he wanted.
Yeah, just make a great track for the level. It, you know, like you said, doesn't have to feel like ice or lava or water. It, you know, which is just really cool.
Yeah, and he's got a new album coming out soon. He wouldn't give me a release time on it, but it's supposed to be, you know, soon, maybe this year, next year, I don't know. But I'd love to see like what he produces, because then he's, you know, like we said earlier, no longer constrained by a game and can kind of, you know, just explore all sorts of different, you know, different, you know, rhythms and other things like that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Genesis had a lot of hardware limitations that he had to work within, and yeah, like you said, it'd be really interesting to see like when he has no constraints, what he does, what his music sounds like. I mean, maybe it's very different. I haven't actually heard any of his stuff, so. But before we wrap up, though, there was actually a third game that came out that was announced in 2003, but it was pretty quickly turned down. There was
this
a lot
for the PS2, right?
Yeah, and there was a lot of changes that they were going to do. They did a complete overhaul in the character design. He was no longer floating orbs. He was more of like a solid robot look.
I could see how that wouldn't go over very well with people who loved the first game.
Right. It was a super drastic difference. I actually thought he kind of had like a Halo look to him.
Yeah. No, I can see that.
And they changed the game even to like a third-person shooter, so it had a full 3D world, and I think even had a sword, almost like a sword out of like an energy or something like that, which was very different. So it was kind of like they were just borrowing the name Vectorman.
Yeah, I would have loved to see how far they got, but it's probably a good thing because of that, probably negative reception.
Right.
So. Yeah, today we covered both Vectorman 1 and 2 on the Sega Genesis, talked a little bit about the composer Jon Holland, and there's a ton of ways to play the game now, so if you missed it, pick it up for sure.
Yeah. Check us out online at pixelatedaudio.com, where we'll keep all of our show notes and track lists. Leave us some comments. It's really a great way for us to hear your feedback.
Totally.
We're also on Twitter at pixelatedaudio.
You can also rate us and leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher. It kind of makes the show more visible, I think.
Right.
But yeah, I hope you liked the show. The track taking us out is called Overflow from the remixer Beatdrop on OCReMix. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in a few weeks.